Gentlemen, please welcome international TV journalist Nik GOWING.
Right, good afternoon. I hope that the other sessions have been good since lunchtime. Please do sit down. We've got a lot to get through between now and 7 o'clock, when we will be joined by the President before then. We're going to have a conversation now with Dominic Barton, who's Global Managing Director of McKinsey. And while everyone here for the last 2 days, it's been a very, very rich series of discussions, particularly the engagement of the next generation, Dominic, who've been really very ambitious and are frustrated at the same time. But as I discussed with you before we came on stage, it seems to me there are other reality checks that you perhaps want to put on the agenda for them. The word disruption keeps coming up, but I'd put to you that in many ways, Africa is still hacking around in the undergrowth on problems compared to what else is happening around the world, and they may forget it. How are you seeing it at McKinsey?
Well, yeah, I think it's a very good context, which is that we are entering an era in the next 15 to 20 years, which we think will be historic by any standards over a 300-year time frame. We will never have seen in this time frame as much disruption as we're going to see.
What do you mean by disruption?
Well, we're power shifts, business model changes, technology. There are so many things that are changing at the same time. One, this shift in economic power from the West to the East, primarily to Asia, but also to Africa. This is where I think Africa has huge opportunity if they move fast enough, if we move fast enough. But you have this economic power shift like we haven't seen in 2,000 years. I mean, this is most of the world's economic power will be in the East, not in the West, and it's happening every day because of urbanization. The second shift is technology. Technology is moving, most CEOs tell me, 5 times faster than management. It's just very difficult to keep up, and most leaders are excited and paranoid at the same time because it's moving so quickly.
Paranoid?
Paranoid.
You would use that word, paranoid.
I would use that word, paranoid, because it used to be, the convention was you had 5 to 7 years to figure out where a competitor was coming from. They were sort of murky, but it might be in your sector. Now what's happening is competitors can grow very quickly, and they typically come from outside a sector. So if you think about automotive, you know, the automobile companies, the notion of having a driverless car and it being invented actually by Google, or the invention of basically an electrically driven fashion car, which is done again by someone outside the industry like Tesla, is a shocker, and you have to deal with it now. It's not 10 years, 15 years, it's in the next 5 years. So these are some of the examples.
Yeah, you talk, in fact, Dominic is not here to promote his book. I've brought it onto the platform because actually this is a brand new book from the McKinsey Global Institute about the 4 global forces breaking all the trends, breaking all the trends. Speak a little more, please, to that issue of breaking the trends. In other words, the assumptions that corporate leaders have, big and small, and governments have, that based on what's been happening up to now, that's what will be happening next. Is that a flawed assumption?
It's a very flawed assumption, and it's something that we, including in McKinsey, need to take our own medicine on because it's affecting everyone. Just a couple of examples. There's more detail in the book, but we in the last 50 years, we've had a lot of tailwinds that we haven't recognized. We've had a demographic boom globally. The population's been young. We've had energy prices, commodity prices, which have actually been at a relatively low level. Even though today they're at a low level, we've had a benefit of that that's moving through it. And we've had a period of incredible economic stability, even with the Cold War, in terms of just, it was understood where things were moving. And what we're seeing now is we have a lot of headwinds that are coming our way. So that's a big assumption that we've had before, except for Africa, which there's a huge, again, opportunity. The rest of the world's getting older and seriously older. And that has big impact on productivity growth. Big driver of productivity growth is labor coming into the workforce. We're going to have way less labor coming into the workforce. That's why I think, by the way, it's very short-sighted of many European nations right now not to be taking migrants in. The scarcity of labor is going to be a big issue in the next 5 to 10 years.
Which is the German government's position.
Exactly. And I think you see the Canadian position as well. There's some countries that are recognizing that this is an opportunity, but I'm just saying that these are some assumptions we've had about why we've got here, which are no longer valid. The other one, as I mentioned before, is technology, just because of the speed. And one other illustration maybe that I try and keep in my mind is the average lifetime of a company, a large company. And it used to be the case in 1935, if you were in the S&P 500, which means you're a pretty established, successful company, you last 90 years. That's the typical lifetime. In 2011, the last time we looked at it, it was 18 years. So the lifespan of a company has gone from 90 years to 18 years. And I would argue 2011 was before we had the big technology disruption. And you think about that when you apply it to governments. I mean, one of the things I learned here was the Prime Minister of Benin talking about the need to be able to get more speed in delivery in government. When you have programs, how do you deliver it to the people? And what you need to do is that's going to have to go faster and faster. And many government entities have been structured 15 to 20 years ago in terms of the design, and they're out of date, and they're going to have to change. And by the way, when I say this again, I say this with some humility, because in McKinsey too, we need to take our own medicine. We aren't also adapting at the speed we need to.
And when was McKinsey formed?
90 years ago, yeah. So that's why I worry. I worry.
All right. But look, there are a lot of the next generation here who've been very active, very encouraging, very inspirational, very innovative. We also heard from President Bongo 2 days ago. The leaders have got to make mistakes. They've got to take risks to make mistakes. But let me just quote to you something which you and your colleagues have written. A radically different world is forming. The operating system of the world's economy is being rewritten as we speak. It doesn't come out in a splashy new release. It evolves, unfolds, and often explodes. Therefore, what's the kind of message to the public servants and corporate leaders here about what they face, quite apart from the immediate challenge we've been discussing in the last couple of days?
Well, I think one of the most important things is we have to change our mindsets. And that's something that you've talked and written a lot about. But one of the mindsets I think we have to challenge are what I'd call orthodoxies. Every organization, whether you're a government, you're a church, you're a business, you have orthodoxies of how you actually, progress, how you meet your objectives. And what we all have to do is challenge every single one of those orthodoxies. How does a customer perceive value from your organization? You have assumptions about how that works. Those are going to be, I would be prepared to have them turned on their head. How do you actually deliver your value? Who do you work with? Who are your competitors? These are all things that are going to have to change. And the one thing I'm excited about too is with this change is I think we're going to get a lot more ideas. This is going to be a time, I actually think, for young people. Because I think it's new ideas, it's asking the unthought of questions, is where we're going to get the breakthroughs. And those organizations that can't challenge themselves in that way won't be around. They'll get disrupted. And even the other thing I'd say is interesting with the World Bank and the IMF and these wonderful institutions that have been set up after World War II and Bretton Woods, they need to change to adapt to this world that we're in. But it's very difficult with the governance system they have, even with all of the people that want to make the changes. And one of the biggest drivers of that change, in my view, will be the AIIB and the BRIC Bank. There's nothing like
talk about that shortly.
Nothing like having a competitor. So I think it's a very good thing for the world that we have that, because that will finally push people to challenge conventions that they have.
Are there messages for the banking and financial community about taking risk and understanding? Because you make a point here of saying, while this new reality is full of opportunities, it's deeply unsettling.
Well, I think one of the things that for leadership, this has very big implications. And we focused a lot on our leadership about what leaders do, where you spend your time, how you align your organization, what are the priorities that you need to focus on. We think there's going to be the who of a leader is going to be much more important, because you can't predict everything as you move forward, even for a 5-year period. So things like resilience, as I mentioned, volatility is going to be a way of life as we go ahead. Volatility is here to stay. In this next 15 to 20 years, we're going to have a lot of it. And you have to have a lot of resilience, because that means you are going to make mistakes. You're going to have setbacks. And those CEOs, those leaders who can't handle the heat in the kitchen are going to be gone. And it's easy to say it, but it's one other thing to be in the arena when you're facing the bull or whatever it might be in that particular place. So resilience, your energy, the purpose that you have, flexibility or agility in how you think, these are all going to be very important characteristics for leaders as we move ahead.
So McKinsey is having to adapt in terms of what you analyze. I've heard you say you aim to try and see at least 2 chief executives every day, just to keep your feet on the ground, remain connected, both with corporate leaders and with public leaders as well. What is the message then about what they've got to do? Because it's easy to default to conformity. And what we've seen here is a new generation in Africa who don't want that conformity. They want to leap.
Well, I think there's a number of things that have to happen. One is I think you have to have the radar out, as you said. Just where is your radar to understand where the changes might be coming from? Because often they're not coming from your sector. They're coming from somewhere else. And even in government, you have to understand, are we the right ones to be able to be providing that service? Is there technology that can do it much faster, differently? So this radar is critical. And the next thing is experimentation, and that means even attacking yourself. So you need to, this is what I said, Walmart, one of the greatest retailers of all time, and is doing very, very well. That makes it difficult to change. Technology and the internet and mobile commerce is going to fundamentally change the game. So they are going to have to compete with their stores, with the online side of things, which causes a lot of friction in the organization.
Let me keep pushing you, because even Walmart are having to change their brand because they've realized they're behind the curve now. But obviously that's not quite as relevant here. There's a fascinating phrase here. Those in large companies, small companies, have got to learn how to reset their internal navigation system. In other words, they've got to keep looking inside to find out whether they're well equipped and appropriately configured. Is that right?
Completely. And I think they have to, I think this concept of us being trained in university, let's say, or in a vocational school once in a lifetime it will be seen as an anachronism. People will look at that and say, you have to keep training yourself. So again, in McKinsey, we have to take our own medicine. We now have a partner university where we have to go back and we have to learn to keep up to speed. And we don't just learn what. We have to learn what is it that, when did people break out? When did people fail or hit the wall? Why did they do that? What was going on with their leadership team? There's a lot of introspection that's required. And I would argue that some people are going to have to realize they may not be cut out for this. They came in assuming they had a certain time frame, that the world was going to work in a certain way, and it's not.
A lot of the next generation here have been talking about how they don't feel fully equipped to handle this new level of disruption, to bring all that together. What do you say to the fact that actually maybe having MBAs and that kind of level of training and education is not appropriate to the Africa setting, because that's what we've heard time and time again here?
Well, I think there's something to that, and we as well are saying, now 60% of the people we bring in are not MBAs, right? They're doctors, they're people that have built pipelines, they're people with just very different backgrounds that are coming into regulators, and I think the thing is you want to get diversity, and I think the other thing is this idea that you have to be at school for 4 years to get some certification, I think is not in tune with the speed of this new world. I think we're going to see a lot more 6-week courses, a lot more 8-month courses to train people to move them through. And that's going to be driven by corporates. People like us, we don't care that much anymore about the stamp people have. We used to. Now, with technology, we were looking for raw intrinsics that we can bring in, train, and move forward. I'd rather have that than someone who's branded in a particular way.
Dominic, in the last minute and a half, what's your impression? You've only been here for 2 days. You were in Europe, and then you're in the United States. You're back in Europe tomorrow, and obviously that's your job as a global managing director. But as you move around the world, meeting those who've got investment interest, how does Africa position itself? And obviously there are 54 nations in Africa.
Yeah, then there's a lot of diversity. But I have to tell you, I'm a I'm very bullish on Africa because I think I spent a lot of my career in Asia. I think the new Asia is Africa in terms of where the future is. A lot of the trends we're talking about is there. But the but I have on it is the speed with which the continent and the countries in it have to move, and the governments, for example, to attract the foreign direct investment. We talked about this on a panel yesterday. The investment rate in this region of the world is about less than half of what it was in emerging Asia when it was moving. So we need to invest at a way higher rate. We have to attract those global investors that are long-term investors that don't have the time or don't have the bandwidth to be able to figure out what they're going to do in each particular country. So we've got to be much more deliberate about attracting the investment here. We've got to change the education system, and we have to get some of the basic, the soft infrastructure, law, the rule, how long it takes to start a business. These are all things that need to be done. They're all doable. To me, it's a matter of it's will. It's just the will to get it done, and when we do it, look out.
Well, Dominic, already the bankers and investment people are lining up for the next session. So you've done a great segue into the next session about the opportunities, but also the challenges and obstacles. So Dominic Barton, Managing Director, Global Managing Director of McKinsey, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.